Good morning, everyone. This is Diane with CaDi Corners, and you have just joined our Bobbin Along with CaDi session 1 of doing this amazing tiled Thomas Kinkade Midnight Delivery designed by OESD. Today is March 19th, 2025, so if you're viewing this on a replay, this is today's date, and this first session is really all about helping you get out of the gate on this beautiful embroidery. Now, I love Christmas. Anybody who knows me knows that Christmas is pretty much the theme of the day, 365 days of the year. So this is what I'm going to be working on this month in particular and through the fall. I'm hoping to have mine all set with a final finish by October, and I hope you're able to join me in that wonderful adventure as well. So today we're going to talk about all the things we need and how to get out of the gate. So let's get started. So first we want to gather up everything that we need, and I am going to be providing links below this video for you to do the same. The first thing was for me falling in love with the Thomas Kinkade tiled design, and so I got the OESD Midnight Delivery by Thomas Kinkade from the OESD site. And I also got their thread kit. They have as well a full bundle that includes the stabilizer that you will need and their suggestions for different items. I'm going to go ahead and take some of the materials from my own stash, so I'm going to be using things a little different than what they suggest. But when you download or when you go out and buy the OESD design, even if you're not sure if you want it yet, you can look at the directions, you can look at all of the thread, you can look at the thread color charts and all of that so that can help you make a decision. There's beautiful. The thread kit that they put together is beautiful thread. I'm loving working with it, and I do intend to do a Floriani and a Robeson Anton chart for folks who might not have the money to go out, and they probably have a really good stash of their own. So I'm going to try to help you with those colors, and so stay tuned. I haven't done that yet, but I will soon. All right, so you're going to want the thread, and I'm going to add to that water-soluble thread. The last time I did a tiled project, which was tons of fun, the thing that I found most helpful was being able to use water-soluble thread on the stitch line on the color that they say is the final stitch line for the block. And what I do is I take my bobbin thread, I put a nice bright color in the bobbin, I put water soluble on the top, and then I stitch that last color. What that does is it gives me a really bright color on the back, so I know where my stitching line is, and I can line that up really easily. And then on the front, it's water soluble, so when I'm done, I can just run a Q-tip with a little dab of water on it up that seam and get rid of all of the bright color thread, so the water soluble goes away and you just pull up the bobbin thread, and it's really kind of cool. So I'm going to be using Superior Threads. I was trying to remember which company. I'm going to be using Superior Threads water soluble thread, and then you're going to need bobbins because there's a lot of stitching in this one. Every stitch averages, between, I think the smallest stitch count was close to 30,000 on the block. So every block is a whole needle, and it's more than one bobbin in most cases. So You'll want to have plenty of bobbins on hand that are already wound. I like to use the dime pre-wound, so I will have a link for that as well. The stabilizers, they are recommending medium weight. I've done a test later on that shows you what substitutes can have, what kind of results you'll get with substitutes, and so stay tuned for that. I'm going to use the peel and stick and in the medium weight. So they're suggesting 2 tearaway medium weight layers, and then also the background is going to be stabilized with a shape flex of some kind. I like SF 101, and so that's what I use. I happen to have that in 60 inches wide, and I will provide a link to that as well. Okay, so let's continue. The fabric is listed, the fabric requirements is listed in the directions, but here it is just briefly. Your background fabric is the piece that you need. So 3.5 yards, and then batting and backing and binding. I'm going to try to put mine in a frame. I'm hoping that this turns out to be the right size so I can use some window sashes that I took out of my house when I replaced some of the windows and the windows I was told were original to the house. That the house was built in 1865, so we just pulled some of those windows out. The sashings are beautiful. I want to refinish them, and I think I want this in one of those windows. I think it'll be really fun. So I'll be interested in knowing how you want to finish them, and I'm sure we'll be gabbing a lot about that as we get further in the stitch along together. Okay, so in addition, you're going to need your hoop. I know there's a lot of us have really big hoops, and then there's a lot of us who have a lot of hoop envy, and the largest size hoop we can use is a 5x7. And so I want to tell you that that's going to be the sweet spot for me, is using a 5x7 hoop. When you're doing tiling like this and you're doing really dense stitching, it's best to use the hoop size closest to the space that you're going to be embroidering. And so because each of these blocks is done one at a time, I want to cut down on the shifting of the fabric in the hoop and stretching and all of that by just using a 5x7 hoop. So I think that's really going to give me the best results, and so that's what my recommendation is. Embroidery needles, sharp 7511s are pretty common out there. Pick the needle that works the best with your machine and your thread combination. I like using pre-wound bobbins. I know some machines are a little finicky about using pre-wound, but I have found in both the Viking Diamond Deluxe that I had and the Brother, I had a Dream Machine and now I have a Luminaire. They love this dime steady stitch class A or style A class 15 pre-wound bobbins, and it's really nice to get them in the nice big tube. So I have on my website you can get a tube. I want to say there's 36 or 38 in the tube. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back out there and take a look, but I'll provide a link to that. A point and press tool is going to be one of those things that you'll want to really help you open up that seam once you've stitched the blocks together, and we'll show you a little more demo later on in this series when we get to where we can start putting our blocks together. So we'll show you those in particular. It's highly recommended in the embroidery world now to use a wool pressing mat, put your stitches down to the wool mat, and then you iron the back from the back side. And the wool pressing mats and OESD has a perfect embroidery pressing cloth. Both of them give really great results, so you'll want to look into that. It's a little better than using a towel, just keep that in mind. Temporary adhesive spray, so depending on your own personal preferences about using adhesive spray, the use for this is keeping your 2 sheets of stabilizer together. So if that's going to help you, then you might want to grab some of that up. You're going to need a rotary cutter, the ruler, and a cutting mat, and then a pen or a pencil for marking. I'll talk a little bit about where you're going to use that later on. So those are some things you can gather up to get yourself started. And then the next step is getting to the cutting and the preparation. And so you're going to, for every single hooping, you're going to need to cut 2 pieces of medium weight stabilizer, 1 background, and 1 of your shape flex or SF 101 for every single hooping. So I've got my stack started, and I'm going to finish, and I'm going to put it all together and, do my steps, and I'll talk a little bit about that. My sister CaDi, after she did her test, I took her advice and decided to go with what she found to be most efficient in terms of using your stabilizer and your just all of the components. She found it best to do the 5x7 and cut every single piece at 12 by 10. So if you have 45-inch wide fabric, you cut a 1/3 yard off of it, cut that into 10-inch segments. The stabilizer, the SF101 comes in 20-inch, and it comes in 60-inch. It comes in 22 and 60-inch, I think is how that comes. I have the 60-inch because 10 goes into 60 6 times, and I felt like that was where I wanted to be, and I would have a little less waste. And so I have a link to that as well. So I'm using the 60-inch shape flex, and I am cutting those pieces instead of just ironing it onto my whole fabric. If you have smaller bolts, you can iron it to the back of your fabric and get that all done, and then cut it all at once, whatever your preference is. For me, I decided to go and cut 12 by 10-inch pieces of everything, and I just cut one thing at a time, and I will eventually have 36. I don't have 36 just yet. This is only session 1, so that's okay. All right, so once you have that all done, then let's talk about what you're going to do with it. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be using Dime's Peel and Stick medium weight tearaway, and with the peel and stick, it comes in a roll 10 yards by 19.5 inches, close enough to the 20 for me to just take and cut a 12-inch strip of that, cut that in half. I'm good. I think my stabilizer, it'll be 9.75 inches basically, and it'll give me plenty of hooping stability, I believe, at that size. So with using the peel and stick, I can stick the 2 layers together. Now, I do like the peel and stick. It doesn't gum up my needle. I've had great luck with the Dime product, and so I do recommend that. And then on top of that, I actually stick my whole fabric piece. Once I put SF101 to the fabric, I'm just putting that whole peel and stick right on there, and I'm treating all 4 layers, so 2 layers of medium weight stabilizer plus the SF101 plus the background. I'm treating that as one, and when I finished putting all of those together, I could stand it up like a book. It just is nice and taut. There's no, well, you can see from the picture here, I didn't have any problems at all getting a nice smooth surface to embroider on. And then what I want to do is hoop that all as one piece. So when we're talking about hooping, you're hooping 4 layers, and so make sure your hoop is opened up wide. Be careful not to force it in. I have had one 5x7 embroidery hoop snap on me because I thought I was doing the right thing and pressing it in correctly, and I was not. And that was a very expensive lesson to learn. So I would highly recommend that you just be really careful. Uh, in one of our Zoom sessions, if you want to look a little more closely on how I hoop, I'll set the camera up and record that. Please join our Zooms. I'm able to get a lot more. After the Zoom, I'll do a presentation like this and give you all a recap. But hey, there's nothing like being with other folks that are enjoying the same project, so I hope you'll find it's a really fun social time. Okay, so we did the cut and prep, and when you're done, what you want to do is you want to turn that over, or just, pick up your hoop and just knock on the center of it, just tap in the center, and it should hear like a drum. It should really sound like a drum. So a nice sound that says, hey, I'm nice and tight. I turn the hoop over to make sure that I don't have any gaps, that everything is set well. I do have the bottom of my hoop has these little lips in it, so I make sure I'm seated in there well. So just utilize the functionality of your hoop and the design of your hoop to make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, so now I did a test stitching because I wanted to see, for the most part, I really just wanted to see how this thing was going to stitch out. And I wanted to see if I could cheat. Because it really does sound a bit expensive to have 2 layers of stabilizer and just, all that stuff. Is it really necessary? And how big does that fabric need to be? And so I did a test that would show you all the problems that can happen when you don't do the way the digitizer has recommended. The digitizer knows that there's a magic number and a correlation between the number of stitches and your stabilizer, so you definitely want to take their recommendation. So in this test, I used 1 layer of heavyweight. I thought, oh, 2 mediums equals a heavy, right? Nope. I did use the SF101. I fused it to the background. I hooped everything together. And by the end of the design, the stabilizer had ripped away and the last stitching line was not placed correctly in terms of the whole design. It was really not a good result. Here is the front. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the picture, the lamp is pretty much off the grid, and there's a great big huge gap on the left-hand side. Well, the reason for that is because the stabilizer ripped away. I had 1 layer of stabilizer and it could not hold up all the different stitches that were going in and all the different stitch needle penetrations that were happening in that area from one color to another. So that's what mine looked like. So my sister Kathy decided to read the directions, and she used 2 layers of medium tearaway stabilizer as recommended by OESD. She did not use the adhesive spray. She just put the 2 layers together. She did hoop it together with the fused SF101 to the background fabric. She hooped them both together. Her results, amazing. Take a look. You can see so much of the last stitching line is so perfectly straight. There's no gapping, nothing on the front. Everything stayed beautifully in her hoop. Take a look at the back. Here it is. It's just wonderful. She's not going to have any trouble at all putting blocks together if all of her blocks turn out this way. So my test number 3, is going to be using the peel and stick stabilizer, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have great results, just like Kathy's results. So I'll show those in our next Zoom session, which is a month from today. So let's go on, and I did want to tell you guys that for all of you who join our Zooms at least one time during these next few months, your name will be entered into a drawing. We're going to be giving away an embroidery bundle that includes the dime pre-wound bobbins, a tube of them, a whole tube, because you know, once you start embroidering, you got to have the bobbins full. They just have to be full. Nothing worse than having to stop and wind. The dime 7511 needles, there's a box of them that will be included in this. That's 20 needles, and we think you'll enjoy using the dime needles. They're just wonderful. And then we want you to experience the dime peel and stick medium weight tearaway stabilizer that I am finding so amazing. And then I'm going to add in 4 yards of our SF 101 at 60 inches wide, because once you start doing this, you are going to want to do more. I can guarantee that. So there'll be a little extra for you to do after you're finished doing your own. You'll be able to get started on the next one for the kids or the grandkids or for a wedding present or for whatever. I mean, this is a beautiful piece of art that you'll want to give to people, and especially yourself. So I hope you will join us for the next Zoom. So that being said, what I wanted to do was just kind of tie all this up with a few facts and tips for you. One thing is knowing when to change your needle. On this particular design, you're going to want to change your needle on every single block. So expect to use 36 needles. The reason is because it's really best to only put about 50,000 stitches at most on your needle. And you don't want to have a break in the middle and then have to bring your machine in for timing and all of that. So just play it safe, stick a new needle in. If you hear puncturing, that sounds like your needle's getting dull, just stop and change your needle and be okay with that. So if you plan on 36 needles, you'll need 2 boxes of 20 of the 7511 if you buy the dime. So how to keep organized. So the pen or pencil is going to come in very handy. When you take your block off your hoop, you're going to want to tell yourself what block you just finished. So I'm intending to use a pen in the, I'm going to leave the stabilizer on. I'm going to trim my block, but I'm going to leave the stabilizer in the seam allowance until I'm ready to sew my blocks together. And I'm going to write in that, on that stabilizer, what block number it is. And so that's how I'm going to keep mine. You might use just little stickers to put on there, but you definitely want to mark your block and use something that's not going to bleed through to the front. You'll be happy you paid attention to that detail. Make sure when you're pressing that you press open all your seams, and that will keep it really nice and flat. You want to make sure you use 1/2 inch, a full, don't skimp, don't do the 1/4 inch because it looks like a quilt. To do the 1/2 inch, trust me on this one, you'll be glad you did. And then when you're pressing your block and and the block is hot, don't move it. Don't move it until it's cool. What that will do is just keep the distortion down, and you'll have a much better result. The stabilizer that you will remove is only the stabilizer in the seam allowance, not behind the design. Leave that right in. You're not gonna try ripping that out with all those stitches. No. And then don't move it from behind the design, just the seam allowance. So those are my facts and tips for you for this first session of the OESD midnight delivery. Stitch along with CaDi. If you haven't joined our Bobbin Along Facebook group, hope that you will. There'll be a link to that below. And then, that group is designed for people who just love machine embroidery. It's a place where we can share our projects and talk about and ask questions to get different results, ask people what they think about the results that we've had, and really just learn and grow together while we're enjoying the craft that we have. So please join us, and thank you for joining us today on our Zoom. Bye-bye. May your bobbins always be full. Happy stitching.